Not many men can get away with full eyeshadow, lipstick, heels and glitter. But for Julian Clary, it is all part of the day job. Some say it's all part of my day job as well. But that's another story for another day. We've seen Julian in BBC dramas, Channel 4 game shows, and as winner of Celebrity Big Brother in 2010. He's currently on tour with his show Position Vacant, Apply Within, which you can see in many of our theatres across Beds, Herts and Bucks. And when I was researching my interview with him this morning, I had that moment when I suddenly realised that his career has spanned an incredible 30 years.
Yes, I know. I don't know how that happens. I've been round the block, haven't I? 30 years. But the thing is, tenacity. Just keep going and evolving. You know, I think probably part of the reason is that I've diversified a bit. So I do my tours where I talk filth on stage, but then I also write books, and I do Just a Minute, and then I go and do panto, and then I do Little Princess voiceovers for preschool children. So yes, just keep moving about is my answer.
You've, of course, just reminded me that you are a major personality in my house, because you do indeed narrate The Little Princess, which is one of the favourite programmes with my 5 and 2-year-olds, I have to say. Going back to the mid-'80s, or even before then, when did you first realise that you had, shall we say, a performance gene?
Well, it wasn't obvious, actually, as a child. I was quite shy and I didn't have many friends, but I did used to I had a very long bus journey to school every day, and I used to sit downstairs and always position myself next to little old ladies, because they had the most amusing conversations, and I used to listen in and save up these stories until I got home, and then when we were having family dinner, I would perform in a way, you know. I would tell these stories, and I got the reward of getting a laugh, and I think that's where something very addictive about making people laugh. You know, there's nothing quite as satisfying as standing on stage and every few seconds getting that hit of a laugh. So that's probably how it all started. I know when I was a bit older, when I was a teenager, I thought I would be a pop star. And then I thought, when it transpired I couldn't sing, I thought, well, I'll be an actor. And then I can't really act either. So you end up, by a process of elimination, doing what you do. And like a lot of people on the cabaret circuit in the 80s, they didn't really fit in anywhere else. Like Paul Merton, Joe Brand, me. Well, what else were we ever going to do? And at least in this life, I can write my own material and talk about myself, and I can write books about myself, and you can sort of make yourself into a product, which I guess is what I've done without any planning, really. That's just how my life has worked out. And
it's interesting you say that you were shyer as a youngster. Does the notion of performing, being on stage, was that in itself addictive because it gave you the chance to almost embody an alter ego?
Yes, and to be noticed. I probably always wanted to be noticed, but I wasn't the person that made everyone laugh in the classroom. I was a sort of effeminate, shy person. So this is what was struggling to get out, perhaps. I don't know. Funny.
The 1980s were, if I say, an interesting time to be openly gay. What I mean by that is the start of AIDS, Section 28 in sort of 87, 88. What was that decade like for you?
Well, it was fun in some ways, but I mean, I don't mean AIDS and Section 28.
No, of course not.
It was fun. There was a lot to be angry about and fearful about. And the alternative cabaret circuit was quite a political place, quite a sort of leftist, left-wing place. So you did feel you were in a more liberal atmosphere, and that you were amongst friends. But part of what I did on stage was to, without talking about Thatcher or whatever, I did feel the need to outrage people, and I certainly had that reputation. That was also quite satisfying, a collective intake of breath that you would get from an audience. But I thought it was necessary to demystify fairly graphically aspects of gay life that maybe I do think that all prejudice is a result of fear and ignorance. And so that was my sort of reasoning, that I needed to talk about it relentlessly in order to break down those barriers, which probably happened to an extent now.
And remembering, I mean, at the time I would have been 11, 12, 13, 14, and the misinformation at the time, not least saying that AIDS was a gay disease. I remember the Daily Mail had that whole scandal about the Jenny Lives with Erica Martin book, and that was in one of the London boroughs. At the time, there was a huge amount of misinformation, and I also wonder whether, be it with comedy, be it with music, when there is anger, that's when the best art is created. Is there a point in that, do you think?
Yes, I think you're right. And it was, if you look back at that decade, musically and lots of other ways, quite rich pickings going on, and I'm comparing that with now, as to what life is like now. And I suppose in terms of my act, it's become more about just making people laugh. That's where I get my satisfaction.
Back to my interview with the legend that is Julian Clary. And you may have seen Julian's episode of the BBC's Who Do You Think You Are documentary, which, if you haven't seen it, investigates the family trees of well-known people. He discovered on the programme that his grandfather was actually hospitalised right here in the Three Counties.
Yes, that was something I didn't expect. I mean, it's very brilliantly done, that programme, because they don't tell you anything in advance. They do let you discover things. And my grandfather Jack died before I was born, so I never knew him. And he had suffered from depression, and unusually he voluntarily went to Knapsbury Hospital, where he was there for a considerable time. And I sort of got to know him through that programme, and you sort of find missing links about yourself, because I'm not a depressive person, but I'm oversensitive, and because practically everything now is genetic, isn't it? I sort of thought, oh, that's where I get that from, because I couldn't work out why I was the way I was. So yes, and they took me to this place, which is now derelict, and it's all broken windows and pigeons flying around. It was all very strange.
And of course, we discovered that you have quite substantial German roots in your family as well.
Yes, German.
Herman the German.
No shame about that. Yes, no, it's amazing what was covered up. I think after both world wars, actually. My grandmother must have known that her mother was German, and that I think she probably had a German accent, but this was never spoken about. And of course, there were a lot of Germans here pre-war. They were an asset to society, but then they were unwanted when things went awry. So yes, lots of German genes swimming around.
I think the power of that particular programme is that deep down we all want to belong, and we all kind of want to know where we come from. How powerful was it for you to really go back the best part of 100, 120 years and really get a sense of who you really are?
Yes, it was powerful, but you end up with quite a lot of baggage that you didn't previously have, because it turns out a couple of generations back, they were living in my family, who I then felt something for, were living in the most terrible poverty. And we found one relative who was a great aunt, I think, who I hadn't spoken to before. And I went to see her in the Isle of Wight. She's since passed away. She was one of 11 children, and I said, well, what was life like? Tell me what meal times were like, because Herman the German died when leaving his wife, my great-grandmother, with 12 children, 12 mouths to feed. And I said, what were meal times like? She said, well, there weren't any, because there wasn't any food. They had to go out and scrabble around. And so you feel pointless kind of empathy for people whose lives are over, because it's you can't do anything about it. So it was like that. You sort of create baggage, but at the same time a fascinating story. And the joy of it is that there was a story there. I know lots of people want to do Who Do You Think You Are, and the BBC will do an initial investigation into your previous generations, and for some people, there's no story. There's nothing much to tell. Mercifully, there was mine was interesting at least.
And as a final note on that, you say that it explained a lot about you and how you are, why you are how you are. You just about discovered that there was an artistic side on your mother's side of the family, wasn't there?
Yes, this was my grandmother, was it?
Teresa.
Oh, yes,
great-grandmother.
Teresa.
Yeah.
You remember it better than I do. Yes, and they were artistic, and they were slightly better off than the other side of the family, and they I think they made wigs. Were they wig makers or something?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm afraid that my memory stops at that point, but certainly, yeah, she was classified as an artist.
Yes, a bit of class there.
His current tour with the show, Position Vacant, Apply Within, sees him get married an awful lot. Every night, in fact. What is that all about?
Yes, it's a scandal, isn't it? I'm marrying a different man every night.
Every night.
And I wouldn't have it any other way.
It says here that there is bound to be stiff competition for your hand. What do you mean by that, Mr. Clary?
Oh, it's all filth. It's all nonsense. Of course it is. Well, the format of the show is that I'm looking for a husband. So I go into the audience with a cattle prod and hoik out about 10 or 8 men, depending on how I'm feeling, herd them on stage into a sheep pen, and then there are these rigorous elimination rounds where I question people and they have to please me in some way by doing things such as eating a fudge finger in a salacious manner. And whoever
Tough
is
tasks.
successful... Yes, harder than you think. Then I end up with the one that I marry, and the people that I don't marry become the bridesmaids and the bishop. And there is a rather moving ceremony with music and confetti. And then they get 10 minutes in my dressing room and a bottle of Blue Nun, and back they go to obscurity. And then I do it all again the next night.
And of course,
it's a comic device, you know. I've always liked improvising, and I've never dared to improvise on such a scale with so many people. But people are funny, people are interesting.
I was going to say, behind every comic device, behind every piece of art and comedy can lie a message. There's a very, very topical theme to this, of course, with gay marriage.
Yes, I'm very pro-gay marriage, obviously, and although it's a very silly show, it's sort of making that point that one day this won't all be a fantasy, and one day gay marriage is the current thing actually that needs demystifying for people, because people are full of trepidation, aren't they, that this will lead to the disintegration of society as we know it. And I think people thought that about apartheid and equality and women getting the vote once, and I think now's the time to demystify that. So this is my contribution to that debate on a trivial level.
You're coming to our patch for 3 nights. It's basically a world tour of Beds, Herts and Bucks. Bedford on my birthday on the 9th of May, High Wycombe at the Swan on the 10th of May, and the Milton Keynes Theatre on the 12th of May. So you're going to be very much hanging around at Beds, Herts and Bucks for 3 nights. Full details of how to get tickets from each of the individual websites. Before you go, though, I just want to ask, 30 years on, had I said to you 30 years ago that you'd find yourself still on stage, living very much the country life in Noel Coward's old pad in Kent, enjoying your gardening and pottering around your land, would you have thought I was mad?
Yes, I wouldn't have thought this would happen because I've always thought I'd do comedy for a few years and then I would be forced to go and get a proper job. But in a way, I wouldn't have it any other way. Going around the country making people laugh there's a lot of job satisfaction in it for me, and it's just a very addictive thing. Getting a laugh is just such a hit that you don't want it to stop. And I've managed to sort of stretch it out this far, and I'll keep going as long. And also you diversify, so you write books and you do radio, and so that is that's why I'm still here as well.
Well, it's going to be our pleasure to welcome you onto our patch, Bedford, High Wycombe and Milton Keynes. If I do come to your show, particularly, for example, on my birthday on the 9th of May, please don't pick me out.
No, you'd like it, honestly. People are full of trepidation, but in fact, they learn to love it, and it's something for you to talk about at dinner parties.
Exactly, or perhaps possibly on air the next day.
Yes.
Julian Clary, absolute pleasure to have spoken to you today, and good luck with the rest of the tour.